Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'm going to be playing the Dwarves, and I'm going to be facing off against the Wood Elves. So definitely one of my favorite matchups. It's always a good time to light some trees on fire, and let's get right down to business, guys. So as far as my army composition goes, I have a pretty traditional front line here. I just have some Dwarf Warriors mixed in with Norgrimling's Ironbreakers. I suppose they're not the most traditional unit, but as of late, in the most recent, maybe 2 months, I've been really enjoying these guys. Extremely high armor, great melee defense, pretty decent offensive stats, especially when buffed by nearby heroic units, and just an all-around great unit. I think they're very good, and again, I used to kind of use them as a gimmick, but I've really kind of just incorporated them into my main army now, and I like them quite a bit. So on top of that, I have some Dwarf Warriors in the wings, and again, when you do invest 1,500 resources in a single group of infantry, like Ironbreakers or Chosen, again, your wings and peripheries are often going to suffer a little bit. So I do have some Dwarf Warriors, but they're pretty tough regardless. Aside from that, I have more Dwarf Warriors here. I have the Grumbling Guard with the Vigor Aura in the back. It is just such a good ability. The fact that, in the late game, a lot of your units are going to be fresh or close to it is going to be a very valuable attribute for you. On top of that, I also do have a second group of Longbeards with great weapons. Against the Wood Elves, I've been seeing a lot more Death Star builds. Again, a lot of people will play the more traditional, Eternal Guards with missiles, but I have been seeing a lot of tree builds, so I decided to just bring some armor-piercing units to hopefully be able to chop them down, and as you guys will see here in a moment, it actually paid off quite a bit for me here. I do have a Master Engineer as well. The entrenchment ability is not bad. The Banner of the Lost Hold is pretty nice when you're playing, kind of a Death Star style, or even just having it nearby your front line will give them, I believe, 12% weapon damage, which I think is quite good. So on top of that, I have another group of Dwarf Warriors out in the wings here, and the Dwarf Warriors pretty cheap, but they hold up well against Eternal Guards, which are very popular. So I like them. They have the charge defense. They got shields against the Elven missiles. Just all around well-rounded unit there. And then lastly but not least, I do have 2 flame cannons. So these guys are so much fun, and flame cannons can get punished in a lot of matchups, against like, Empire, for example. If they have like a single great cannon, they can just range them, shoot them down, and it's really rough. But against the Wood Elves, they do pretty well because, usually the Wood Elves do have to come to you if you have any sort of siege or, range pressure like this. They do have the Arrows of Kurnus, which can do okay against them, but still you can usually get away with using flame cannons, in my opinion. I do have Grombrindle over here as well, and 2 Runesmiths. So that's pretty much it, and actually it's just 1 Runesmith and then the Master Engineer. My opponent's army. So this was definitely very shocking, and it was very fun. It worked out very well for my flame cannons, and it was one of the primary reasons I wanted to show you guys this game. He does have Dryads everywhere. So his entire army is trees, actually. So he has all Dryads as far as his basic infantry corps. On top of that, he has a bunch of Treekin, which you guys will see. So he has a secondary line of Treekin. He has Durthu over here. He has a Spellslinger with the Lore of Life. You can see it has the Earthblood. And then he does have, it's kind of hard to see right now, but he does have 2 Tree Men also. So he has a bunch of Dryads. He has 3 or 4 Treekin, 2 Tree Men, and then Durthu on top of that, and the Spellslinger with the Lore of Life. So a very fun army composition. Get to see the last March of the Ents here and see how they do against our DAWI brothers. So it should be fun. I have a nice little position here on the hill because he's going to have to come out of the forest. Probably if he really wanted to wait it out, and force me to advance here and pressure him, he would have had more cover. But he did come to me, which was nice. Simply because it's pretty irritating when one player or other just hides in a tree line and waits it out. But he's going to come here, but he still does have a fair amount of cover. The range of these cannons is about right here, a little bit further, so he's going to have, some decent tree cover as he advances. And, again, these flame cannons are going to do pretty well against the trees, because even Dryads, if you guys take a look there, you see that little icon in the bottom left corner. Let's go ahead and see if I can kind of zoom in. Sometimes it's hard to, mouse over it and look at the same time, but you can see they have a vulnerability to fire of 40%. So that's going to be pretty massive considering the flame cannons already hit very hard. So they're shooting in here right now. Let's go ahead and get a nice cinematic view of how they hit. So not the best contact, but you guys will see once they get their second volley in, there's a Rune of Wrath and Rune as well, which provides some nice pressure, but the arc on those is pretty good. And it's going to get in there and do some serious damage to these guys. You can see they're taking some pretty substantial HP damage. But my opponent reacts very well and actually uses Earthblood on his front line. Although I don't know if that was the best choice to use that on the Dryads, but I suppose that's the only spell he has, so he's going to be able to get a lot of value out of it. So you can see the Ironbreakers throwing him in there. These guys are just getting cooked. Like this whole Dryad line is just getting taken down pretty hard, but they do charge in. I did miss my charge with those Dwarf Warriors, but that's a-okay. They're pretty sturdy and should be able to hold up for a while against Dryads. They only have 30 armor, so, the Dwarf Warriors, with their relatively low combat stats, should still be able to get in there, but he has a lot of Dryads. That was definitely one of the issues there. But I do have Dwarf Warriors in the wings who are kind of protecting, so if he does try and circumvent my flank, I have auxiliary troops, I have a lot with me, so. My opponent does use a Flock of Doom back here. I believe he was trying to hit, the whole group here, but unfortunately he only got these Longbeards here, which is rough. But I do use the ballistics calibration of the Master Engineer, which also affects these flame cannons, and you can see they're just shooting in here, just destroying these Dryads. And the Master Engineer is very nice for sniping out targets like Durthu, who are big and relatively armored, so it's going pretty well for me here. So the flame cannons are actually shooting directly onto Dirthu right now, who has engaged these iron breakers. Thankfully, they do have charge defense against all, and Dirthu is starting to take a bit of damage. And Big Papa Grombrindle, noticing that the real threat has arrived, is slowly wading his way through the ranks and should do pretty well for himself. So the trees are getting in here. He doesn't have a ton of armor piercing though. That's definitely one thing. These treekin here are definitely going to take like 45 minutes to get through these iron breakers, because not only do they not have armor piercing, they have very, very low. Let's go ahead and see here. So treekin, I believe they have pretty low melee attack, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's 26. I could have sworn it was 22 before, but it must have gotten changed. But my opponent went ahead and used another Flock of Doom here, so that was a much better one. It hit most of my melee core, doing very, very well for him. You can see a lot of his Dryads and other units here starting to get worn down by those flame cannons, but he is doing pretty well breaking through my front line. And for my opponent, he really needs to protect these treemen here, because though they don't have armor piercing, they still have 500 weapon strength, so they're going to do plenty of armor piercing damage, and that's probably one of his best tools in this particular matchup. But it still did catch me off guard quite a bit, but thankfully I was kind of in the mood to just bring flame cannons, and it worked out quite well. So I do use entrenchment here, which gives him armor piercing damage, as well as physical resistance. So it helps out a little bit with Dirthu, though he does do magic damage. I don't know how pertinent that is, but still Big Papa Grombrindle gets in there, and he's chopping some trees down, doing pretty well for himself. You can see Dirthu actually got crushed pretty hard there. And I didn't even have Slayers, but Ironbreakers are holding this guy in. You can see they just have like a tight box around him. They're not letting him walk around, and these cannons, even though he's kind of penetrated my back line with these big heroic units, are still firing. So you can see they're kind of rotating around. And now that I do see Dirthu running away, I switch the flame cannons onto him, and they're making some okay contact. It's missing a little bit there, but the Master Engineer was kind of doing a pretty good job poking him as he ran away, and you can see the cannons continuing to pressure him. Looks like they made a little contact there, did about 100 HP damage. So over in the flanks, it's going pretty well. These Grumbling Guard here, they have a pretty good matchup, because they do have armor piercing, and as you see, their durability, they're still fresh, which is great. I mean, the treeman here is tired. And probably the same goes for most of his troops, but unfortunately, one mistake I made, guys, is try and keep the Grumbling Guard like in the center. So what I should have done is sent my other group of Longbeards to go after this guy and kept these guys in the center, because then all these guys here, you can see my Dwarf Warriors here are tired. They're very tired. These ones are tired as well. These guys are still fresh because they were next to the Grumbling Guard. So if I had kept the Grumbling Guard, up here on the hill and had switched them out, it would have made a huge difference in terms of the durability of my troops. So just a lesson learned, guys, just my 2 cents, but it's definitely very, very helpful to keep them high and tight. So Grombrindle in here, you went ahead and used Grombrindle Has No Fear, because I did have some Dwarf Warriors that were getting low, and we're starting to get, steady and, not steady, shaken and kind of in that range. So it was a very good time to use it. You can see they're continuing to hold the Dryads, despite the fact that they're at, 18 models here. It's a very, very good situation for me. The flame cannons are also continuing to fire. You can see they're shooting up here into these treekin. We're able to do pretty well against our models. And also here, it's a pretty good situation because the DAWI are mixed in with great weapons as well as shields. So I have the high melee defense kind of saturated with that armor-piercing attack. And of course, the flame cannons were doing pretty well covering me there as well. So you can see Dirthu over here came back from route. He is steady again. And the Master Engineer actually went tree hunting over here and is doing pretty well for himself. He does have pretty heavy hitting, 287 armor-piercing melee attack. So it's pretty good. You can see Dirthu's just taking those flames like a champ. And he is an absurdly powerful melee combatant. He actually has 65 melee attack right now, so he's going to be making some solid contact. But thankfully that flame cannon is supporting, and you can see Dirthu's down to 47 HP. And that Master Engineer is just an absolute trooper getting in there, wavering but still fighting. But unfortunately he does get terrified, and he does get the sword there a little bit. But this should be enough to finish Dirthu when these flame cannons hit. I was pretty impressed this game with how the flame cannons just continued to fight over the course of the whole battle. I mean, there was literally a tree man like fighting on top of them, and these cannoneers are still in there just shooting despite the fact that there's dryads and trees everywhere. So I was very happy with that particular outcome. But these Grumbling Guard down here were able to actually outclass this tree man. We're able to just beat him in a straight up fight. So I was very pleased with that as well. But the Grumbling Guard, that was definitely the biggest mistake I made this game, I would say. I mean, there was a multitude of mistakes, but having these Grumbling Guard in the center of your mass is very, very important for getting that value, because these are one of the best units that the Dwarves bring to the table in terms of that Vigor aura, because, if I had played properly, look, they're fresh. They were fighting some giant tree who was whipping them for, a good 7-8 minutes there, so very, very good. But if I had kept them in the center, it would have made a pretty substantial difference in terms of my main infantry corps. But very interesting army from my opponent. I don't know if it was the most cost-effective against the Dwarves. I think having some Eternal Guard would have made a huge difference, but clearly, he was just having some fun trying out the Treebeard build over there. So very well played to my opponent there, and thanks for giving me an excuse to use flame cannons. So as far as the kills go, Grombrindle did pretty good, Runesmith did well, and as you can see, the Dwarfs, they held their own against, the Dryads who, the Dryads are pretty squishy. I mean, I think they do have some sort of resistance of sorts, but they actually have 30 melee attack as well. But still, they held their own. These guys did pretty well against the large trees. Ironbreaker is always an MVP. I mean, they were just extremely high health. their melee attack against these kind of relatively low melee attacks of the Treekin, it took them quite a while to do any damage to these guys. And of course, the Flame Cannons, you guys saw, they were roasting some Dryads and doing quite well against the Treekin and Durthu as well. So very well played to my opponent, the Lawbringer. Always fun to see unique builds like that, and I look forward to seeing you again on ladder. And I hope you all have an excellent night. Take care.